The silence before the truth. The night was quiet when Keanu Reeves sat alone in his small garden. The wind was soft, carrying the smell of flowers, yet his heart felt heavy. He had been carrying thoughts for years that he never dared to share. Thoughts about his fears, his doubts, and the loneliness that sometimes followed him even in crowded rooms. From the outside, people always thought Keanu had everything. He was admired, respected, and loved by millions. But deep inside, he often felt like a man standing in the middle of a storm, pretending not to shake. Every smile he gave, every humble gesture was real, but it also hid a silent question he never spoke out loud. Will anyone ever understand the weight I carry? That night, he received a message from Sandra Bullock. It was simple. She had written, "Can we talk?" Her words felt warm, but Keanu's chest tightened. He remembered their past, the connection they once had, the trust they shared on sets, and the way she could always see through the surface. Keanu whispered to himself, "Why now?" But he knew why. He had reached a point where silence was no longer strength but a prison. The next day they met at a quiet cafe, away from cameras, away from the noise of fame. Sandra walked in with her usual grace. Her eyes carried kindness, but there was also a firmness, a silent strength that Keanu had always admired. When she sat down, she didn't smile right away. Instead, she leaned forward and asked softly, "Are you okay?" Those words broke something inside him. He wanted to say yes, to act strong as always, but the truth pressed against his chest. His voice was low, almost trembling. "No, I'm not." For a long moment, Sandra said nothing. She just looked at him, her silence more comforting than words. Keanu took a deep breath and continued, "I have fears that never leave me. I fear losing people I love. I fear waking up one day and realizing I gave everything but kept nothing for myself. Sometimes I even fear the kindness I show is not enough to balance the emptiness inside me." Sandra's eyes softened, and a tear escaped before she could hide it. She whispered, "Keanu, you don't have to carry it all alone." Her voice was steady, but her heart was shaking. She knew what it meant for him to admit such things. He was a man who gave without asking for anything back, a man who always chose humility over pride. And yet here he was, laying his soul bare like a wounded child searching for light. The cafe grew quieter, the world outside moving as if nothing was happening. But for Keanu and Sandra, this was not just a conversation, it was a turning point. Keanu's mind flashed with memories of long nights alone, of moments when he smiled on screen but cried behind closed doors. He thought of people he had lost, of chances that slipped away, and of the weight of living with both fame and solitude. He looked at Sandra and asked, "Do you ever feel the same? Do you ever feel like the world sees you but never really knows you?" Sandra took a deep breath. "All the time," she said. "But the difference is, I never stopped hoping that someone would sit beside me and understand. Maybe that's what we're here for, Keanu. Not to be perfect, but to remind each other that we are human." Her words struck him with unexpected force. For years, he had built walls thinking they protected him. But now, in front of Sandra, those walls felt fragile, ready to fall. The air around them grew heavier, filled with emotion. People in the cafe might have thought it was just two friends talking, but inside, it was a storm of unspoken truths. Keanu reached for his cup but set it back down. His hands shook slightly. "I don't want to live with fear anymore," he admitted. "But I don't know how to let go." Sandra leaned closer, her voice calm but powerful. "You don't need to let go all at once. You only need to let someone hold part of it with you. Maybe that's what friendship is. Maybe that's what love is." Keanu looked at her, and for the first time in years, his eyes showed vulnerability without shame. He realized she was not just listening. She was carrying his truth with her. The silence after her words was not empty. It was filled with understanding, with a bond that went beyond words, beyond time, beyond the image the world had of them. As the evening ended, Keanu and Sandra walked out of the cafe. The city lights shone, but neither of them noticed. What mattered was the quiet promise that passed between them. They would face the shadows together. No matter how heavy they felt, Keanu finally smiled, Not the practiced smile the world always saw, but a small, fragile, honest smile. And Sandra returned it with one of her own, as if to say, "You are not alone anymore." That night, Keanu lay in bed staring at the ceiling. For the first time in a long while, he felt lighter. Not healed, not free of fear, but less alone. And sometimes that was enough to begin again. The weight of memories. The next morning, Keanu woke up early. The sky outside was pale with soft colors of dawn, yet his mind felt restless. The words he had shared with Sandra the night before echoed in his head. He had spoken about his fears, and though it gave him some relief, it also stirred memories he had tried to bury. He walked into the kitchen, poured himself a cup of coffee, and stood by the window. The city was waking up, but Keanu felt caught between past and present. He remembered the faces of people he had lost, moments of silence when grief filled his home, and times when he had to smile for the world even as his heart was breaking. A sudden knock at the door pulled him back to reality. When he opened it, Sandra stood there holding 2 paper bags. "Breakfast," she said with a small smile. Keanu blinked, surprised but touched. They sat at the table, the sound of cups and plates filling the room with a kind of comfort Keanu had not felt in years. Sandra looked around his home, noticing the quietness, the empty spaces where pictures should have been. "You don't keep much," she said softly. Keanu nodded. "Sometimes things remind me too much of what I lost, so I keep less, hoping it will hurt less." Sandra placed her cup down and leaned forward. "But memories are not always pain. Sometimes they are the only proof that love was real." Her words sank deep into him. He had always believed that love was fragile, that the people he cared for were like stars that could vanish without warning. But hearing Sandra speak with such gentle truth reminded him that even stars leave light behind, even after they are gone. He looked at her, his voice trembling. "Do you ever wonder if we are just pretending to be strong because the world needs us to be?" Sandra's eyes glistened as she nodded. "Every day. But pretending is not always weakness, Keanu. Sometimes it is survival until the right person shows up and tells you it is safe to stop pretending." Keanu felt something shift inside him. It was as if her words opened a door he had long kept locked. The rest of the morning passed slowly. They shared stories, laughed at little memories from years ago, and for the first time, Keanu allowed himself to laugh without feeling guilty. But as the laughter faded, silence returned, carrying with it the shadow of truth. Sandra noticed his face grow distant. "What is it?" she asked. Keanu hesitated. His hands pressed against the table as if steadying himself. "I fear the past repeating itself. I fear that no matter how much I give, I will always end up alone." The words cut deep, not only for him, but also for Sandra. She reached across the table, gently placing her hand over his. "Then don't carry it alone this time. Let someone walk beside you." For a moment, Keanu said nothing. He only looked at her hand resting over his, steady, warm, and real. Later that day, they decided to take a walk by the beach. The waves rolled in, steady and endless, like the rhythm of life. Keanu found himself staring at the horizon, wondering if the ocean carried answers he could never find. As they walked, a child ran past them chasing a red balloon. The balloon slipped into the sky and the child cried out. Without thinking, Keanu bent down, comforting the child with a smile. "Sometimes balloons fly away," he said gently. "But it doesn't mean you will never hold another one." Sandra watched this moment carefully. She saw in Keanu's eyes the kindness that had carried him through years of silence, the humility that made him beloved by so many. But she also saw the cracks in his soul, the fear that even his kindness would never be enough to keep people close. When the child's mother came and thanked him, Keanu simply nodded as if uncomfortable with gratitude. Sandra shook her head with a quiet smile. "You always do this," she said as they continued walking. "Do what?" Keanu asked. "You give pieces of yourself to strangers, yet you hold back from giving the same to yourself," she replied. Keanu stopped walking. Her words were sharp but true. He looked at the sand beneath his feet, then at the waves crashing softly. "Maybe I don't know how to give to myself," he admitted. Sandra's expression softened. "Then maybe that's where we begin. Not with fears, not with walls, but with learning to be kind to yourself." As the sun began to set, the sky painted itself in shades of gold and orange. Keanu felt something he had not felt in a long time, a fragile sense of hope. Yet deep inside, he also knew this journey would not be easy. Shadows do not vanish overnight. Fears do not dissolve in a single conversation. But walking beside Sandra, hearing her words, he realized he did not need to fight alone anymore. The waves continued to crash, steady and endless, as if reminding him that life moves forward, no matter how heavy the past feels. And in that moment, Keanu made a silent promise to himself. He would try, even if trying meant breaking down and rebuilding one piece at a time. The storm inside the night after their walk by the beach, Keanu sat in his room staring at the dim light of a single lamp. The house was quiet, but his mind was not. Every word Sandra had spoken replayed in his thoughts. Be kind to yourself. It sounded simple, yet to him it felt impossible. He leaned back in his chair, his hands covering his face. The truth was that being kind to others had always been easier. Giving came naturally, but accepting love, accepting peace, that was where he struggled. He feared that if he ever allowed himself to rest, the silence would remind him of everything he had lost. A sudden vibration broke the stillness. It was his phone. A message from Sandra lit up the screen. Could we talk again tomorrow? Keanu stared at the words for a long moment, then typed back, yes. The next day, they met not in a cafe or by the beach, but in a quiet park. The trees whispered with the wind and the air smelled of rain. Sandra brought 2 cups of tea, handing one to him with a soft smile. You look tired, she said gently. Keanu nodded. I didn't sleep much. She studied his face, the lines of exhaustion mixed with unspoken pain. Tell me what kept you awake, she encouraged. He hesitated, then finally spoke. I kept thinking about the past. The people I lost. The nights when grief was so heavy I thought I would drown. I thought of all the times I smiled at the world but cried alone. And I asked myself, what if it never changes? What if I always carry this emptiness? Sandra listened, her hands wrapped around her cup. When he finished, she said softly, maybe emptiness is not something you fight. Maybe it is something you learn to live with, but not alone. Maybe it becomes less heavy when someone shares it with you. Keanu looked at her, his eyes searching. But what if I lean on someone and they walk away? What if I give my truth and it's too much for them? Sandra's gaze was steady. Keanu, real bonds are not built on perfection. They are built on scars. If someone walks away from your truth, they were never meant to stay. But if someone stays even when it hurts, that's when you know you are not a burden. Her words sank deep, leaving silence between them. Keanu's chest felt heavy yet lighter at the same time. As they sat there, clouds gathered overhead. The sky darkened and soon rain began to fall. People hurried out of the park, covering themselves with umbrellas. But Keanu and Sandra did not move. They sat on the bench, letting the rain soak through their clothes. Keanu tilted his head back, water streaming down his face, mixing with tears he no longer tried to hide. It feels like the sky is crying with me, he said quietly. Sandra reached out, her hand brushing his arm. Then let it. Sometimes the sky knows what we cannot say out loud. The storm grew stronger, thunder rolling in the distance, but neither of them left. It was as if the rain was washing away years of silence, years of hidden pain. Finally, Sandra spoke again. You have always been strong for others. But strength does not mean never breaking. True strength is allowing yourself to be seen when you are most fragile. Keanu turned to her, rain dripping from his hair, his eyes raw with emotion. Then what if I tell you I am afraid every day? Afraid of losing people. Afraid of failing. Afraid that no matter what I do, I will never be enough. Sandra's hand tightened on his arm. Then I will tell you that you are human. And being human means carrying fear, but it also means carrying love. You don't need to erase one to have the other. Her words struck him like lightning, sudden and undeniable. In that storm, surrounded by darkness and rain, Keanu felt something break open. It was painful, but it was also freeing. They sat together until the rain softened to a drizzle. Keanu looked at Sandra and whispered, "Thank you for staying." She smiled faintly. I'm not here to leave, Keanu. I'm here to remind you that you don't have to face the storm alone. As they walked back through the wet streets, Keanu felt a strange sense of calm. The storm outside had mirrored the storm within him, and though it had not ended, he no longer felt swallowed by it. That night, as he lay in bed, he thought of Sandra's words. "Scars build bonds," he repeated them softly, letting them sink into his heart. For the first time in years, he drifted into sleep not with fear, but with a fragile sense of trust. The hidden room. The next morning, Keanu woke up with an uneasy feeling. The storm of the previous day had left his heart both lighter and heavier at the same time. Lighter because Sandra had stayed, heavier because her words had opened wounds he had long tried to seal. He sat at his table with a notebook in front of him. It had been years since he had written in it. Inside were pages filled with thoughts he never shared, secrets he never spoke, and fears he buried deep. As he turned the pages, he saw the handwriting of his younger self, raw, fragile, desperate. Suddenly, there was another knock at the door. When he opened it, Sandra stood there again, her hair tied back, her eyes calm yet curious. "I was worried," she admitted. "After yesterday, I wanted to make sure you're okay." Keanu stepped aside and she walked in. The notebook lay open on the table. Sandra noticed it, but she didn't touch it. Instead, she asked softly, "What is this?" Keanu's voice was low. "It's the part of me I never let anyone see. Every fear, every broken night, every memory that still follows me." Sandra walked closer, her steps careful. "And why now?" she asked. "Because yesterday, in the rain, something broke open," Keanu confessed. "And I realized maybe I can't keep hiding forever." He pushed the notebook toward her, his hands trembling. "If you read this, you'll see the worst of me." Sandra looked at him, her expression filled with quiet strength. "Then let me see." "Because the worst of you might still be the most human part of you." Slowly, she began to read. Page after page told stories of lonely nights, fears of abandonment, memories of faces gone too soon, and the endless question, why was he still here when others he loved were not? Her eyes filled with tears as she turned each page. "Keanu," she whispered, "this is not weakness. This is survival. Every line here shows how much you endured, how much you kept going even when it hurt." But Keanu shook his head. "No, it shows how broken I am. And I fear if people knew this side of me, they would see me as less, not more." Sandra closed the notebook gently and placed her hand over his. "You are wrong. Brokenness does not make you less. It makes you real. It makes you someone who still chooses kindness, even after pain. Do you not see how powerful that is?" Keanu's eyes glistened, but he remained silent. Sandra stood, walking to the window. The sun was rising, light spilling across the room. "The world admires you for being humble, for being kind. But if they knew this truth, if they saw how much you gave while carrying this weight, they would not admire you less. They would admire you more." Her words hit him hard. He realized he had built his life like a locked house, showing only the clean rooms while hiding the ones filled with dust and shadows. But Sandra had stepped into the hidden room without judgment, and instead of turning away, she had lit a candle inside it. He whispered, "Why do you stay, Sandra? Why do you keep coming back when you could walk away?" She turned and met his eyes, her voice steady. "Because I see you. Not the actor, not the man the world claps for, but the human being who still carries love even in his pain. And I will not walk away from that." For the first time, Keanu broke down. His body shook as tears streamed freely. He covered his face, ashamed, but Sandra walked forward, wrapping her arms around him. She held him without words, her embrace steady and warm. In that moment, the silence was louder than anything else. It told Keanu what words could not, that he was not too heavy, not too broken, not too alone. When he finally pulled back, his voice cracked. "I don't know how to heal, Sandra." She touched his shoulder gently. "Healing is not a straight road. It is messy, slow, and painful. But you don't have to know how. You only have to take the first step. And you already did, by letting me see." Keanu looked at her, his heart pounding with both fear and gratitude. Maybe for the first time, he believed healing was possible. As the day ended, Sandra left quietly, but her presence lingered like light in the corners of his home. Keanu sat back at the table, staring at the notebook. For years it had been a prison of his pain, but now it felt like the beginning of freedom. He whispered to himself, maybe scars really can build bonds. The fear of losing again, the night after Sandra read his notebook, Keanu could not sleep. His heart felt lighter, yet a new kind of fear began to rise. He had finally opened the door to his hidden self, but now he worried. What if letting someone that close would only lead to more loss? He sat on his balcony, the city lights glowing beneath the night sky. The air was cool, but inside him burned a quiet storm. He whispered into the dark, "What if I lose her too?" The next day, Sandra arrived again, carrying the same calmness that always followed her. She noticed the heaviness in his eyes. "You didn't sleep, did you?" she asked softly. Keanu shook his head. "I kept thinking, what if I let you in? What if I lean on you and one day you're gone? I don't think I can survive that again." Sandra's face softened with sadness. She pulled a chair closer, sitting beside him. "Keanu, I cannot promise forever." "No one can. Life is fragile, unpredictable. But I can promise this. I will not walk away because of your fears, and I will not leave because of your truths. If the day comes when life takes me away, at least you will know that for this moment, I stayed with all my heart." Her words cut deep, both painful and comforting. Keanu looked at her, tears forming in his eyes. "But how do I live with that risk? How do I not fear every bond, every person, when I know how easily they can disappear?" Sandra reached for his hand. "You live by choosing love anyway. Fear will always exist, but so will love. And love, even if it ends, is never wasted." For a long time, Keanu sat in silence, her hand steady in his. He wanted to believe her, yet the shadows of his past pressed against him like ghosts refusing to leave. Later that evening, they walked together through the city streets. The noise of cars, the chatter of people, the lights glowing in windows, all of it surrounded them. Yet Keanu felt strangely isolated inside his own thoughts. Sandra noticed his silence. "What are you thinking?" she asked. He hesitated, then said quietly, "Sometimes I wonder if people would still see me as kind if they knew how afraid I really am. I feel like the world sees only one side of me, the humble man, the giver, the quiet one. But inside, I am filled with doubt." Sandra stopped walking and faced him. "Keanu, kindness is not the absence of fear. It is the choice to give even when you are afraid. That is why people love you, not because you are perfect, but because you are real." Keanu's chest tightened. Her words were like a mirror reflecting back the truth he had never allowed himself to see. They reached a quiet spot by the river, the water reflecting the city lights like scattered stars. Keanu stood there staring at the moving water. "Sometimes I feel like this river. I keep flowing, but I never know where I belong. People see the surface, but they don't see how deep the water runs." Sandra stepped beside him, her voice soft. "Then let me see the depth." "I am not afraid of it." He turned to her, his eyes raw with vulnerability. "But what if my depth only drowns the people who get too close?" Sandra placed her hand gently on his chest. "Then trust me to swim." Her words pierced the silence, leaving Keanu speechless. He felt a tear roll down his face, but this time he did not hide it. He let her see it. For a long time they stood by the river, no words needed. The night wrapped around them, quiet and endless, yet filled with the sound of flowing water, like a reminder that life moves forward no matter how heavy the past feels. As they walked back, Keanu finally whispered, "Maybe I cannot stop fearing loss, but maybe I can stop letting that fear control me." Sandra smiled, her eyes gentle. "That is the first step. And I will be here for the next one too." When Keanu reached home that night, he sat once more with his notebook. But this time, instead of writing about fear, he wrote a single line. "I am not alone anymore." For the first time in years, the page did not feel like a prison. It felt like the beginning of something new. When the world watched, Keanu thought his fears were private, locked safely within the quiet spaces he shared only with Sandra. But life has a way of testing the walls we build. One morning, as he walked out of his home, cameras flashed and voices shouted his name. Reporters surrounded him, their words sharp and eager. "Keanu, we heard you've been distant lately. Is something wrong? Are you struggling with something personal? Is Sandra Bullock the reason you've been so quiet?" Keanu froze. The world he had tried to keep separate, the world of fame and lights, was now colliding with the fragile trust he was building with Sandra. He forced a small smile, gave no answers, and walked away. But inside, panic twisted through him. That evening, he called Sandra. His voice was shaky. "They know. They're asking questions. They're already making stories out of things that are not theirs to tell." Sandra was calm, but her eyes carried concern. "Keanu, let them talk. They only see what they want. But they don't know the truth." Keanu's silence stretched over the phone. Finally, he whispered, "But what if the noise of the world drowns the quiet we've built? What if all of this breaks the bond we've started?" The next day, Sandra came to see him in person. She walked straight to him, her eyes steady. "Listen to me, Keanu. We cannot control what the world says, but we can control what we protect. If you let their voices become louder than your truth, you'll lose yourself again. Don't let them steal what we've started." Her words gave him strength, but fear still lingered. A week later, Keanu and Sandra were spotted together at a small charity event. They had gone to support children in need, but the cameras captured every glance, every smile. The pictures spread across the internet, and soon people everywhere were talking. Some admired them, others questioned, and some even mocked. Back at his home, Keanu sat in silence, scrolling through headlines that twisted the truth. "Hollywood's quiet man hides secrets," one read. Another said, "Keanu and Sandra, what are they hiding?" His chest grew tight. He closed the screen, his breathing uneven. Sandra, sitting beside him, placed her hand gently over his. "Don't look at them. Look at me. What matters is not what they write, but what we know." He looked at her, his eyes heavy with conflict. "But I've lived my whole life trying to stay humble, to stay quiet, to not draw attention. And now being close to you has made me feel exposed in ways I can't control. I don't want you to suffer because of me." Sandra's voice was calm but firm. "Keanu, kindness is not weakness and love is not shame. If people choose to misunderstand, let them. What matters is that we know our truth. And if I have to face storms because of you, then I will. Because storms do not scare me anymore." Her words struck him deeply. For a moment, he wanted to argue, to push her away so she would not bear the weight of his shadows. But something inside him finally broke free. He realized that love was not about protecting someone from every storm. It was about walking through the storm together. As the night grew quiet, Keanu found himself telling Sandra something he had never spoken aloud. "I once believed that every person who stayed close to me would eventually leave, either by choice or by fate. But tonight, hearing your words, I realize maybe I have been wrong. Maybe some bonds are strong enough to stand against everything." Sandra's eyes filled with quiet emotion. She took his hand and whispered, "Then let us prove it, Keanu. Not to the world, not to anyone else, just to ourselves." In that moment, Keanu felt a shift. The fear was still there, the doubts still whispered, but beside them was something stronger, a belief that maybe, just maybe, he was worthy of being understood, even in the face of the world's noise. The voice within, the days after the headlines, passed slowly. The noise of the world had grown loud, but inside Keanu's home, there was a strange quiet. He found himself sitting with Sandra more often, sometimes talking for hours, sometimes saying nothing at all. It was in those silences that he discovered the truth. He did not need to carry everything alone anymore, yet even in the warmth of her presence, the old fear still whispered. Late one evening, as they sat together, Keanu finally spoke. His voice was low, trembling, but steady enough to carry the weight of his heart.
"Sandra, I don't know if I will ever be free from my fears.
I don't know if I will ever feel whole, but I know this. Every time you sit beside me, every time you listen, I feel like I am not drowning anymore." Sandra's eyes glistened, her hand reaching for his. "Keanu, no one is whole. We all carry cracks, we all carry shadows. But it is in those cracks that light enters. You have carried pain for so long, yet you never stopped giving. Do you realize how rare that is? Do you realize how much hope you give to others even when you feel empty yourself? His eyes filled with tears, but he did not look away. And what about you? Why do you keep staying when you could live an easier life without my shadows? She smiled softly, her voice steady. Because staying is not a burden when it is for someone you respect, someone you believe in. And because I know that behind your fears is a heart that has never stopped loving, never stopped hoping, even when you told yourself otherwise. Her words struck deep, breaking open the last wall he had built. In that moment, Keanu felt something he had not felt in years. A sense of peace, fragile, but real. A week later, they attended another small event, this time for a children's hospital. Cameras were there, of course, but Keanu no longer flinched. When a reporter asked if he was happy, he paused, looked at Sandra beside him, and for the first time in public, he spoke honestly. Happiness is not about being perfect or fearless, he said gently. It is about having someone who stays when the world feels heavy. It is about kindness, about trust, about hope. I am learning that now. The words spread quickly, but this time the world responded differently. People admired not just his humility, but his honesty. They saw a man who had carried pain, yet chose to share his truth. And for many, it gave them courage to speak of their own fears. That night, back at his home, Keanu and Sandra sat quietly by the window, watching the city lights. He turned to her and whispered, "Thank you for teaching me that fear does not have to be the end. It can be the beginning." Sandra smiled, her eyes warm. "And thank you for trusting me with your truth. That is more than enough." Keanu leaned back, the sound of the city fading into the background. For the first time in a long time, he felt not just lighter but stronger. The fears were still there, yes. But beside them now was something greater, faith in the bond they had built, faith in the light that came through the cracks, and faith that even brokenness could lead to something beautiful. And as he closed his eyes that night, he whispered to himself, "I am not alone." Not anymore.